What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. And this one is massive. This one is huge. And this book, excuse me, that I'm reviewing comes on the heels of my actual interview with Isabella Greene, which is actually happening later today. So you're going to see this video drop, and then shortly thereafter, you're going to see the interview drop. This is one of the best books, if not the best book I think I've read on this entire topic, because she covers so many things. She gives us a big picture, and she ties up so many loose ends that at least were in my mind anyways. So I can't say enough positive things about this book. And we're going to get into it. This is also my way of breaking it down and solidifying a lot of the concepts in my mind in preparation for my interview, like I said, which is happening in a very short time. So without further ado, we got to get into the mix and let's talk about this incredible book. Here we go. So I've broken it down with a lot of excerpts that cover particular topics. And without further ado, here we go. First, she describes astral projection, which I think is interesting, along with a couple other techniques as well. So she says, in her own words, the technique is relatively simple. You need to slow your physical system down to such a degree that you become able to lift or vibrate your non-physical form out of your body. In most cases, you will be able to turn around and observe your body lying there while you find yourself standing next to it in your non-physical form. Astral projecting is usually the result of very deep relaxation, and you can learn this technique on your own or from a teacher, which is obviously something that I believe I've been trying to do via meditation and via going to Monroe. There's a concept that she talks about a lot called the fake void compared to the true void. We're going to get to the true void later in some other excerpts. But what is the fake void? It is this black space that you go to where you think you're outside of the matrix, but it's actually still a realm constructed within the confines of the matrix. Very, very trippy, very deceptive. In my recent remote viewing experiences, which I facilitated during out-of-body travel outside of the Earth matrix while looking in, I've seen the layout of the system with the black outer ring, the fake void, and the multiple colorful layers underneath, blending into each other way that made them difficult to count. This means I did not count the dimensions of the matrix myself, but Darius's 12 astral dimensions make a lot of sense to me. So what she's saying here is when you're in this fake void, you can still see these different colorful layers. And I think she's also referring to Darius right here, saying that what he is seeing as the 12 realms and these levels that he, I think, is perceiving as the entire expanse of creation is still just a view from within the matrix, and he's not being able to see outside of the matrix. So food for thought, but very interesting. And we're going to get to how you distinguish between being in the fake void and the true void later on. This is an interesting excerpt where she talks about Bob Monroe, obviously somebody that I've become very familiar with after going to the Monroe Institute. She says, interestingly enough, and Loosh, what is Loosh? We're going to talk about this right now. In chapter 13, he mentions the same exact visual. He describes the rays collecting and transmitting Loosh love energy where it is most needed. Monroe also called Earth a carefully designed school of compressed learning to learn how to be high-quality Loosh love producers. It's interesting the way he describes it, because a lot of New Age thinking says that Earth is a school. We're here to learn lessons, sort of like this infinite repeat of lessons that we seem to never graduate from. We'll get to that later. But he also describes it as a school, but not for our own benefit, but as a school, almost a training ground to make us the highest producers of Loosh possible, some sort of a factory, some sort of a farm. Now, this is where Isabella Greene is describing what is remote viewing in her definition. So this might sound surprising to you, but I consider remote viewing a subcategory of astral projecting, which I haven't heard it described this way before. It's interesting. Simply because to successfully remote view, we either need to project our consciousness non-locally, to travel to a location in our astral form, or merge our consciousness with the energetic fabric of reality that contains all information. Remote viewing is also done in deep relaxation while we remain fully aware of our objective and our humanness. In most cases, the targets that people remote view are within the matrix realms as well. And then she has this other category. She has two other categories that I don't hear other people define or describe. First is, what is spirit travel? Spirit travel occurs as a result of the cosmic Cobra breath practice, not necessarily during sleep and not necessarily with one's Kundalini fully awakened. It lands you in the dark space of the fake void, but you retain your humanness and the memory of your intent. And from there, you can instantly hop into any of the realms within the greater matrix construct that we perceive as cosmic without experiencing speed or hitting a firmament. Now, this is interesting because when we talk about the fake void, so this idea of retaining your humanness and memory of your intent, she says if you retain all of that, that is a clear indication that you're in the fake void and not the true void. So just FYI, but this is what she describes as spirit travel in contrast to quantum travel. And this seems to be the highest objective. I'll find out for sure when I interview her, but I believe that's what I'm understanding. Quantum travel is facilitated via cosmic cobra breath. This is kind of her keys to the escaping the prison, cosmic cobra breath. Coupled with mid-sleep meditation, the rapid movement of our Kundalini energy opens our exit point, the so-called 1,000-petaled lotus, and we blast out of the body through the top of the head like a bullet out of a gun. We bypass the fake void and all the matrices, both Earth's and the greater matrix alike, and all of our humanness and everything that traps us in these constructs is left behind. It's all gone. So this is how we know we've gotten to the true void, and according to her, the key is cosmic cobra breath, which we're going to talk about in the interview at length. So how do we exit the matrix? The matrix was not set up to let us go, thereby implying it's highly difficult to do so. We exist to feed, support, and sustain it, whether we know this or not. The only way out is at the moment of passing, meaning dying. But this is likely to mislead as well. Not every death liberates us from the grip of the vast matrix system, the intricacy of which is far beyond our comprehension. I suggest that the only kind of passing that can free us is a conscious departing at the end of a long, fulfilling life for which we must train. Now, the other thing to remember here is long, fulfilling life. This does not mean that we should pursue any sort of premature exit. I think she reiterates this message over and over. Live life, live it to its fullest, live a fulfilled and determined life, and then through that life, prepare. And it doesn't matter the way in which you go. She talks about this as well. But you just must prepare your mind and your subconscious and your unconscious for that moment, and then you can exit the way you need to effectively get to the true void. Now, this is wild. I talked about this in another video based on an interview that she did. She's actually gone out through an astral projection and seen the Demiurge, as described in the Gnostic text, the one who's basically in charge of this entire false reality that we seem to be entrapped within. From the energy emanating from the being, from the way it was wrapped around Earth, holding it like its own, the same way animals hold prey, from the body language clearly indicating this is mine. I knew Earth was his property, his prey, his domain. His attitude could be best described as cold, self-centered, dismissive, and arrogantly confident, where nothing could change his course. She describes it looking like a dragon, I believe, with like a lion's head, super crazy that she saw this. And I believe this is even before she started diving into the Gnostic text. So it's kind of interesting that she saw this vision being corroborated by the Gnostic text and other writings. But we're going to talk about this in the interview. This is wild. I also want to know, how did she really understand, maybe on a deeper level, what she was seeing? But that's a pretty trippy one, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. Now, this is Isabella Greene's take on the gods. Gods meaning gods of different religions, specifically the Hindu texts and whatnot. So what are these gods, or who are they, and what were their objectives when they're teaching humans things? They taught humans to do the practices that allowed them to reach their objective, while we were taught to look at them as gods, divine forces of creation, the supreme beings, and to aspire to serve them in every way possible. We were taught to view the outcome of the practices they taught us as the highest levels of spiritual realization. But if we look closely, we will see that none of the traditional enlightenment paths, quote unquote enlightenment, fully liberate us from the matrix and the reincarnation system. Effectively, what she's saying here is that the gods are agents of the matrix, knowingly or unknowingly, right? It could be both categories. But that's effectively what she's saying. She also talks about in other sections of the book, the blue beings that we see in Hinduism are similar to the Pleiadians that are described from other folks like Elizabeth April and whatnot. So they're all part of the same system. And again, we're going to understand a little bit later why I say knowingly or unknowingly they're part of the system, because this also blends into spirit guides, because she also talks about spirit guides. It's like this is why this book is so amazing. She weaves together so many different perspectives into this one unified narrative, and starts to make sense of why we see this entity or that entity or this god or that one, and they're seemingly sometimes giving messages that seem to be positive, or how does that all fit within the system? And she does fit it all within the framework. I'm not saying it's everything she's saying is perfect and correct. Like we have to look at everything with with discernment, which she says herself. But it is one of the most logically put together narratives of the entire system, at least that I've seen thus far. Spiritual practices. So she's now talking about how spiritual practices can keep us entrapped, but she's not saying that we have to dismiss them completely because they can still have their positive benefits. Do not get me wrong. I have nothing against attaining enlightenment, doing yoga, and practicing advanced spiritual disciplines that elevate us into healthy, blissful, and supernatural states. But these practices most definitely offer ways to better our lives and give us access to a fuller experience of ourselves and divine nature. But please stay awake and practice discernment. So don't get too wrapped up. Don't get too astounded and amazed by the things that we experience, learn, and see in these states. Still maintain your discernment. And I think the overarching message is don't give in to anything and don't be like, okay, this one being or this one entity is all the answers. Same with people. We want to stay out of this mindset of idolizing people or entities, because then once we do that, there's a hook in us. And then once that hook is in us, we can fall victim to more deception and manipulation. Maintain sovereignty. This is something that Tony Sayers talks about all the time. Instead of calling in and giving your power away to invisible but ever-present forces that you might not fully understand, instead of inviting them to take over you, maintain your sovereignty to the highest degree available on this planet. Remember that. We hear this over and over, and I think this is probably one of the messages that rings the most true. It's simple. Trust yourself. Trust you. How we are manipulated. In all Earth Matrix dimensions, especially in the pre-birth and afterlife realms, we are continuously told that we need to be punished or must incarnate hundreds of times to evolve, in some cases thousands and even more, improve and learn lessons. But in actuality, all we do on Earth is follow what the ever-present invisible forces teach us, convince us to do, and push us into doing. You know, another thing is this idea of learning and growing and evolving. There's two things I want to say. Number one, in some of these pre-birth memories that I've covered. And again, these can be subject to manipulation too, so you have to be careful. But there are some that say prior to coming into Earth and incarnating here, we were all pretty much perfect. We were all good. There wasn't negative or evil entities out in those realms, whether you want to call it the pleroma or where else. That only existed once we came into this framework. So if that was the case prior to entering, why do we have to learn, grow, and evolve? That doesn't really make sense. And the second thing is the way the system is set up with the food chain, with the built-in need to constantly consume, destroy, and replenish ourselves. There's always going to be something that we screwed up. There's always going to be some way that we created negative energy. There's always going to be something that they can go back and look to and point to and say, you need to fix this because that was bad. You could have done this better. We're going to make mistakes, inevitably, undoubtedly. So that whole idea of learning lessons and improving, it doesn't really hold water, because what is the objective? That we all eventually live on a mountaintop and meditate and just in hibernation and live this perfect life where we do as almost minimal as damage as possible? We can't. The system, the world, the planet isn't set up for that. This doesn't make sense. So to me, this just screams absolute. The system is set up for us to fail. Earth is someone's farm. This was interesting. I think this comes from Monroe, but I can't remember for sure. Earth is not ours. It is someone else's farm, and we are the stock who are not permitted to leave or destroy someone else's property. The stock sustains and worships the farmers, remains limited, and stays confined under the electric fence of the firmament so that we do not wander too far or cause Loosh guzzling gods any inconvenience. Pretty wild. This is a big one, and I think this gets misconstrued a lot of times. People think we want negativity, fear, anger. So if we avoid those low vibrational states, we won't be feeding the system. Not true. Love is, in fact, the highest form of Loosh. And this comes from Robert Monroe. Pleiadians teach us to produce the frequency of love and bliss, and we love this idea since love and bliss feel better than suffering. Unfortunately, according to Robert Monroe's discovery in Far Journeys, love is the most pristine and most sought-after form of Loosh within the industry. Something that we, as love-deprived and love-enamored humans, do not want to hear or think about. Well, there's another section as to why fear and anger and all these other things seem to be ever present, despite Loosh being the most high energy, high content Loosh out there. And we're going to get to why that is momentarily. So what is prime Earth? Now, this is the interesting bit that I really need to talk to her about. This goes in line with the theory of, okay, for like when you read the Gnostic text, at least under my understanding, it's like the entire material world was created at the beginning, all under the guidance of Galdabaoth. And everything in the material world is just for this Loosh production and for his intent or whatever. But maybe that's not the right interpretation, because we've heard other people say, well, at one time, Earth was pristine. It wasn't what it is today. And then it was commandeered. It was hijacked. This is what she's talking about here with prime Earth. Like I said, I've heard other people talk about this, whether it's from remote viewing or other means, but this idea makes sense. And maybe it's just a matter of interpretation of the story from the Gnostic text, right? Just like with any book, it's so hard to understand really what's being said, because we have to apply a dash of interpretation and discernment to everything. So here's Isabella Greene talking about this prime Earth idea. According to David Icke, prime Earth is natural organic reality that existed prior to the creation of the inverted Earth simulation. This was never my understanding of things, but after reading about prime Earth in David Icke's book, an idea also supported by Lauda Leon, I've talked about her before, who was quoted in the same book, decided to see if I could remote view prime Earth, and she was able to. What I saw was a pristine planet, pure, vital, and healthy. I saw lush vegetation, clean waters, and pure skies. I saw nature at its finest, all organisms coexisting in perfect harmony, no food chain, no destruction, which I've said over and over is the system set up for failure, in my opinion. Like a perfectly tuned mechanism, but there were no humans. Both humans and animals sexually reproducing, killing, often consuming each other, and living in constant fear for survival were created to be a part of the Loosh collecting industry. That resonates with me. Without the need for Loosh, the life forms that produce it in abundance did not seem to be required. There's prime Earth. If we want to talk about why is the food chain here, why do all these things exist when they seem perverse, they seem ill-fitted to any sort of journey for true learning and growth? Well, it apparently wasn't here before. Apparently existence was quite different and quite harmonious. And all the chaos and disharmony we see here, you can try and frame it in a from a vantage point of, no, it's controlled chaos or something along those lines for us to learn life lessons, which I don't think really resonates with anybody if you really think about it. But now we see that perhaps there was an existence or a time or a dimension where it wasn't like that. It was commandeered. These things were brought in to create this perfect Loosh farm, really. Life is consumption. Again, going back to the food chain and how perverse it is. Earth as we know it was set up to be a continuous food chain in which, in order to live, everything had to kill, absorb, or consume something else, either in part or as a whole. The famous quote from the failed Jupiter Ascending describes Earth perfectly. Life is an act of consumption. Now, here she talks about Loosh, and Loosh being a commodity. I've heard other people talk about this, that it is traded, that it is sold. Apparently, Loosh is a commodity that is not only consumed by these beings, but is also traded. Earth is part of a much greater Loosh industry, and once the Loosh garden became sustainable with the creation of the human battery, it became something like a highly desirable piece of prime real estate over which wars were fought in space. Other people have remote viewed these wars and talked about this as well. And other people have said that Earth is part of an entire system, an entire collection of Loosh farms, one of many. How many? I don't know. Talking about resets, the idea of civilizations maybe becoming too wise to the system or too many souls escaping, then we have these resets and these system upgrades. So here Isabella Greene says, what are we in? We're in, according to her, the third version. I've heard other people say 8th version, 12th. I don't know, but this is what she said. If this theory is correct, we are currently in the third version of the Earth matrix system, where at the moment of physical death, our souls can still get out, but only if we put significant effort into it and prepare while still alive. Just like in its previous versions, the system still has loopholes, and we have found them. But something is coming, and she said this in a video as well. We have a 4th version coming. Although wording varied, the core meaning remained the same. Humanity is running out of time. If the reincarnation cycle is not exited after this lifetime, humanity will lose the very opportunity to leave the construct due to the installation of a new modified bulletproof system that will have no more loopholes for us to utilize for our escape. She talk about it more. Okay, no, she doesn't. So that's all I got there. But do I really believe that it will be impossible? And by the way, this is just a belief. I could be wrong. But I don't, because I do think at our core we are infinite and we have infinite power. So I think there will always be ways to escape. That will those diminish or shrink or minimize? Sure, I could see that. But I don't think it will ever be possible to keep us really, truly, infinitely trapped. I just don't think that's possible. Could be wrong. But something deep inside me says, no way. Can't do it. It's not possible. You can make it really, really hard, but you can't make it impossible. That's what I think. Why is there a depopulation agenda? If all of us are producing loosh, might think the more the merrier, the more the better, the more crops, the better the harvest. Because we've heard about this from many folks, that there is a depopulation agenda. So how could that fit into the entire agenda? This is how. It is my opinion that the depopulation agenda is not about getting rid of the number of souls incarnated on Earth. The handlers want to keep that number as high as possible. So she's saying, yes, they still want to keep it as high as possible. It is about replacing the old body vehicle with the new one within whatever period of time they see fit. And this requires a timely cleanup. So that may be why, in fact, depopulation is something that is sought after, not to actually reduce the number of souls on Earth. No, far from it. But it's just to have them come in a new capsule that is more easy to extract loosh. And another agenda here, she's talking about luring fresh souls. In parallel with the current depopulation agenda, which is nothing more than getting rid of the human body model 3.0, there is an ongoing recruitment of luring in campaign to bring more fresh souls to Earth from all kinds of other realities. Now, I've talked about this in other pre-birth memory videos. How are they bringing in souls? She does talk about it in this book. Basically, one of the ways she says is there's a beacon signal going out from Earth, like a distress call. People, like she even described in her first book, she heard it and she wanted to come here to incarnate and help. Maybe that's why I came here too. Maybe that's why many of us came here. I don't know. But that's one way. I've heard other people in pre-birth memories say that they saw somebody that looked so shiny and bright and said, how did you get this amazing aura? And they said, well, you got to come to Earth and incarnate, and that's how you just level up. And like, oh my God, I want that too. And they get manipulated that way. Or others have been greeted by tall hooded figures and said, you should come here. And basically from this misconception of authority, they say, okay, I must go there. And they kind of fall in. So I think there are different ways and methodologies based on different souls and their energy that souls are manipulated and confused into coming here. But apparently this is an ongoing mission. This is very interesting here because she touches upon this idea of procreation and how it might be built in as a piece of the system to basically encourage everybody to keep procreating, to place motherhood and fatherhood as like one of the highest goods on the planet. But again, that's just a part of the system to keep more vehicles ready for new souls to come in. She puts a caveat on there that she doesn't want to. Obviously, there are great things with parenthood, and she's not trying to say that, oh, it's like a bad thing to be a parent. And I want to say the same thing as well. This is just information. This is just something to be mindful of. And obviously, if we're entertaining these ideas, I think it makes sense that if we truly are in a trap, we want to think about the motivations behind creating basically more vessels for the trap. So anyways, this is what she says about procreation. It makes sense to me. Could it be that in order to ensure continuous and flawless loosh production on the Earth farm, all living species, including the human race, were genetically engineered to be driven by physical survival and procreation instincts? Think about it. Probably one of the greatest physical pleasures we experience is during sexual concourse. Why is that? Is that because, you know what I mean? Of course, there could be multiple explanations. It could be that this is a divine force guiding us into that process, but it also could be the biggest bait to lead us into that process that then just feeds the system. Think about the emphasis on pair bonding and the societal constructs of how it's seems to be forced upon us. She talks about how people, I mean, like myself, right, who have chosen not to go that route, almost get shunned by society to a certain extent. So there's the physical driving forces, there's the societal constructs that pushes us into these life choices. And then also look at, you can see so many things. I think there's just so much disharmony then when you get into a lot of these situations. Not in all, okay, but for a lot of people, it's difficult to be in these lengthy relationships with families, with kids. It creates a lot of stress. I mean, we hear it all the time. Relationships are work, and certainly they are. But is that again a mantra from above, putting us into these situations to just like keep the loose streams going? Again, food for thought. I'm not saying I know one way or the other, but these are things that I think we should all consider before just blindly going into the norm and falling into these basic societal constructs that we take for given or granted. Could it be that in order to make procreation bulletproof within the human population, where some members were able to overcome this drive and choose not to propagate the species, procreation was linked to societal pressure and also something the majority of humans were unable to resist? Love, right? Again, talking about those societal pressures, same thing. Once you are in the afterlife dimension, there's no winning this game. So what she is saying, by the way, is here with we are unable to resist, is be very careful. Once we get into these astral realms, we're kind of stuck, in her opinion. All these people saying, nope, just say, I wish to go home. Just deny the life review. Just say these different things. She believes that it's once you're in this zone, you're kind of stuck. Other people disagree. I don't know where the truth lies, but just take it with a grain of salt. The handlers have perfected their ways of keeping you and getting your consent every time. They have a way of completely disarming us by opening our hearts and overflowing us with a tremendous amount of love that we as a love-deprived species are unable to resist. And now this is her take on the New Age idea of we're incarnated to learn lessons. Here's what I currently believe. Anyone or anything physical or non-physical who tells you humans are on earth to learn lessons, pay off karma, suffer for your own good, or experience evil to learn about the good is either an archon, has been conditioned by the archons, or has been conditioned by human beliefs that were instilled in our minds by the archons. I said this earlier. It doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really add up. I won't say it again, but you guys know how I feel. This narrative to me lacks logic, because we are set up to fail. We are set up in a system where each and every day when we get up, we're destroying something. There's always going to be room for improvement. It's impossible to navigate this life peacefully and beautifully in a way that we cause no harm. Now let's talk about the types of Loosh from Robert Monroe. Again, it's not just fear, anger, and all these negative emotions. It's positive as well. Monroe described his unpleasant discovery as follows. He found that the rulers of Earth fed on and gave us a list of the most common types of Loosh. Collectors have evolved an entire technology with complementary tools for the harvesting of Loosh from the Type 4M units, human beings, he wrote. The most common have been named love, friendship, family, greed, hate, pain, guilt, disease, pride, ambition, ownership, possession, sacrifice. And on a larger scale, nations, provincialism, wars, famine, religion, machines, freedom, industry, trade, to list a few. Pretty much everything that modern life revolves around. Can't really escape it. So now we're going to answer the question, well, if love is a better source of Loosh, why is there so much fear, anger, and horribleness on this planet? Here's why. We have, however, been constantly nudged towards love. With all the present-day teachings about living in unconditional love, we still are. How many people are actually able to do that? Not many. How many are able to experience fear, anger, misery, and suffering? Just about everybody. So what she's saying is why the world the way that it is with all the negativity is because most people, even though love is giving off higher emanations of Loosh, it's hard, it's difficult. So the fear, the negativity, it still provides Loosh, but the vast majority of people, at least in our current state, are able to access it. So that's what's being thrust upon us. And it still creates a net, like the net optimized value of Loosh, at least according to Isabella Greene. That makes sense to me. Could be right, could be wrong. I don't know, but it makes sense. Here she talks about spirit guides, what they are, where they come from. And I love this because she reconciles something that is talked about in Michael Newton's book, The Journey of Souls, spirit guides. And they're more evolved souls. How does that fit into this framework, or the framework of Loosh and the framework of the Matrix and the Astral and all this stuff. Here's how. Spirit guides are not deliberate liars and mean well, but they operate within the system's dominion, within the Matrix. Blinded by the unspeakable lightness and beauty of the astral realms they find themselves in after graduating, enlightenment, whatever that means, Earth, and conditioned by the archonic agenda while still on Earth, they have little chance to question the system or have full awareness of the agenda behind it. What are they saying spirit guides are? They're us that have been basically manipulated into believing we have graduated, and then we don't have to incarnate here anymore, and that seems great, but we're still stuck in the Matrix. And then we're guiding other souls, again, not necessarily trying to actively manipulate, but we're part of the system that has manipulated us. And so then we just continue it going forward. That's why it's probably hard to tell when these spirit guides are they being deceitful or not? No, they're probably, as far as they know, they probably are being truthful. This might be one of the places where discernment fails us because they are, as far as they know, being open and honest and truthful. But the manipulation is occurring at a higher level. I mean, we see this on Earth with a lot of the black budget projects, with a lot of figures that are pushed in our face. Like, as far as they know, they're telling us the truth. But again, the truth as disseminated to them via compartmentalization and otherwise. And this is usually the best delivery vehicle for the misinformation and disinformation. So wild. Again, that's why this book is incredible. So going forward with spirit guides, just as humanity was right here on Earth, it appears that all of these spirit guides have been persuaded by the archonic system to support the afterlife and Matrix agendas. Up until recent years, humanity barely had any access to a perspective different from what was drilled into them by the archons and their servers. What about those of us like myself that come here and think I have a purpose to save people, to help people? Sadly, this is what she said, because this hit me very personally. And what do you think about the recurring notion of having a big purpose on Earth? Every single person who's had a regression, near-death experience, or pre-birth memory believes in this. Both in the afterlife and in the pre-birth realms, souls are programmed to believe that they're going Earth to make a difference. Like, I feel that. I felt that since I was a kid. But she's saying that's part of the construct and part of the programming. Maybe that's what might keep us here. No, I want to keep coming back because I need to keep helping more people, even if we see the deception and the manipulation. It's very interesting. And then what about all these past life regressions and the information that we get from those? All of this is a clear indication that information collected through hypnotic regression is nothing more than archonic programming. Some people may not like to hear this, but it makes sense. She also talks about psychedelics. We have to be wary of psychedelics. I've done DMT. I've talked about it. This gives me a new perspective on these types of experiences. The reason for this is that earth-based plants and fungi, along with their spirit forms, are simply not able to give us access outside the Matrix. She says this because they're inherently part of the Matrix. So just as with hypnotic regressions, take with a grain of salt the information you receive during your psychedelic trips. And remember that too, it comes from within the Matrix. What about living a happy life? Is all lost? Should we just give up on living a happy life? No. And this is great because I do try my hardest to live a happy life. I am living a happy life. Yes, it is possible to take advantage of the loopholes within the simulation to allow us to enjoy our lives right in the middle of the Matrix game. We can own our power of manifestation as creator beings and remain sovereign without giving our power to any external forces. We can regulate our feelings and states of being by monitoring our attitudes and perspectives. I love that. I mean, obviously, I love that because that's how I'm already living. It's kind of confirmation bias. But nevertheless, it resonates with me. Let me know if it resonates with you as well. What about this idea of enlightenment? Do we have to be enlightened? And I need to get more clarification from her when I talk to her about what this means. But she says you can be completely unenlightened and learn how to direct yourself out of the Matrix structures and into the true void at the end of your life. And that will be the end of your incarnations. And then she said, or you can be totally enlightened and find that you're still pulled into the next level of the system. So enlightenment is not a prerequisite. So she says, how do we exit the Matrix? Kundalini. The practices that allow us to exit the cycle of rebirth and the entire Matrix construct are intended to help us wake up and gain control over our Kundalini energy, which in a nutshell is the rocket fuel that gets us out. To achieve this, we utilize the cosmic Cobra breath known as Tantric Kriya Kundalini Pranayam, along with mid-sleep meditations. Now, when we exit, what if we see entities that are telling us, come here, come there, you made it, you did it, you've exited? If entities are present, they are not taking you out of the Matrix. They might take you to the next level of the game at the best, but there's a lot of room for deception here, so I wouldn't count on any such assistance. There are no beings of any sort within the true void, which is ultimately where she says we should aim to go. And we have one chance. The only window of opportunity to quantum jump out of the matrix is at the very moment the soul exits the body at death. There will be no other chances, according to her. Now, as we go on this quest to figure out what to do, to figure out how to escape the trap, she says we may experience positive interference. If the happy occurrence is perfectly timed to when you were just about to start your training and have only just started your practice or have only just begun to notice the results, it is a clear indication that you are looking at positive external interference. Behind this interference is your system's intent to nudge you to drop your practice and give all of your attention to a shiny new thing. She talks about interference as a new love interest, maybe a new job, or maybe these positive things that come into your life and distract you. Beware of that. If that doesn't work, you could get negative interference to derail you. If we are on the path and we need to know the game, then you could get negative interference. This could play out as a string of challenging circumstances or uncomfortable events that suddenly hit out of nowhere, continuing one after the next until a person's nervous system is shot. Okay, so these are things to be aware of on this path. Now, she talks more about Kundalini energy. What is it exactly? Because it seems to be so central to her philosophy of how we escape. The only way to achieve this is to train tirelessly here and now, while we still have a body equipped with the very thing we need to accomplish our goal, Kundalini energy. We do the practices to awaken Kundalini energy, which we use as rocket fuel for our soul to propel itself out of all matrices in one instant quantum jump. There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is a summary of a lot of the higher points. Obviously, there's so much more in this book, and I highly recommend that you buy it and read it in its entirety. But these are some of the big extraction points, or the big points that I wanted to extract and share with you guys, because it raises a lot of interesting connections as how we string together all these different pieces of information under one umbrella, under one unifying theory. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm sure there's a lot more that we still have to learn and discover and understand, but very, very interesting and amazing food for thought. And after you see this video, be on the lookout, because the interview is about to drop, where I'm about to do it in like a few minutes. So I'm about to interview Isabella Greene. We're going to get into the nitty gritty. We're going to explore everything in detail. Be on the lookout for that. Here we go. We're on our path. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.